Alright, howdy folks. I'm just going to make a video showing you a little bit about how to make little spice scoops like this. Just tiny things that are fun to carve. If you get good at it, you can even make ones that measure, or if you're consistent enough, which I'm not, but look at this, I got kind of lucky. You can make small matching sets, somewhat matching. So just a few of the things that I've made in the past. I enjoy saving the little offcuts, little pieces of wood. These are cherry, these are all cherry, this is apple, little offcuts of wood, and then just seeing what I can make out of it. And one of the things I really enjoy making is like scoops and spoons. I like making things that are used. So yeah, you can see this is pretty roughly cut. This is, this is just probably was axing out something bigger, and I saw this little piece of wood, and I just went wham, wham, and then a whack down the back, and I didn't spend any more time on it, right? Two down the side. So I always tell people just a lollipop shape, and from there you can go pretty far. So that's all this is. So let me put these away, and let's get going. So here's another rough cut one. This is extremely rough cut, but if you're whittling and if you're just passing time, what's the difference, right? What's the difference? It's probably somewhat fresh, but I don't anticipate this wood being too fresh. You can see it's wet because I did my best to keep it fresh, but we'll see. So first things first, make sure you get the kind of shape you want, a little bit more specifically. And this is one of those things where if you do spend more time when you've got your axe out, you'll spend less time doing this part right now, which I'd highly recommend. I'm sure when I cut this little scoopy thing, I'm sure I was not axing stuff with the intent of making scoops, so I probably did not spend a lot of time on it. Hence, very rough shape. So, that's okay. The other thing is when it's tiny, the truth is you could start with a rectangle and probably not be too far behind where I am right now. Little side note is I'm carving this piece of wood, which was sitting in my freezer for a while, because when it's fresh, I put it in the freezer to keep it fresh. Put it in a Ziploc bag. Maybe put a little bit of water in there, a little extra water to add to the moisture content. And there's actually an advantage to letting the wood sit for a little bit. In my opinion, after it sits for a while, it develops a waxier texture, which in my opinion is much more preferable for carving. So when wood is super fresh, it can be easier to carve, but I feel like super fresh wood is much more prone to cracking as it dries. I feel like super fresh wood also, as it does dry afterwards, you end up having to do a lot more cleanup finishing cuts. Whereas if it's aged like this, you can see it's already coming off with a very nice sheen. So there's a potential that if I didn't want to, I wouldn't have to go back to finishing cuts. Probably would, just because I feel like it's higher quality. But alright, so as I'm doing this, as I'm getting closer to the outline of my shape, I'm also thinking about how much crank I do or don't want. And one of the things I tend to do is if you just keep a little bit more meat on the back side here, And don't worry about the crank yet. Once you make your bowl, you can actually take your knife and bring down the ends of these sides, or shave these sides in, which I'll show later, like this, but this is more or less what I'll do, and it will actually give it a crank later in the game as opposed to having to plan it all out right now. So I think that's my plan for this one. That's especially with smaller spoons, it's a good trick, or if you've got a bigger spoon that you're trying to fix. That works too. So this scoop is just a little long for this cut to be nice and easy, but it's okay. So I'm going to keep a little bit more meat on this though. I think I'll come back to this a little later. Okay, so this is also really rough up top, so I want to bring that down. So this is also a cut that, right now I'm pretty much removing wood that I know I'll have to remove, and then I'll make some other decisions later in the game. Alright, so this is kind of naturally developing the crank here because I'm having to go across the grain down. Because if you try to go directly parallel with the grain, it's going to create some chip out. So you can see how that's happening because I'm not even going super steep. But you want to make sure you're going across the grain just a little bit at an angle, and that's what leaves the best finish. I feel like I say this a lot when I'm working with smaller stuff, but it is, I think, in my opinion, easier to get hurt when you're trying to carve small stuff. So if you're trying to carve a small stuff like this, be careful. Everything's really close together, and when you're trying to muscle your knife across stuff, anytime you feel like you're really forcing your knife to do something that it doesn't want to do, that's a good time to reassess. Think, is there a better way I can get a little bit more leverage? Okay, here. Cuts there. Looking pretty scoopy. I think I'm going to go for a little bit of a teardrop shape for now, then decide how much I want to bring in those shoulders later. So basically keeping it pretty open-ended. Alright. So I have so far given the scoop its general shape, and mostly by just removing wood that I know I have to remove. So any wood that was frayed, any chips, any really obnoxiously lopsided stuff I got rid of for the most part. I'm by no means a symmetry pro, but so far so good. If you really wanted to, if you were really a fiend for symmetry, you could put this down on some graph paper, feel it out more, but I am not. I do my best, and I'll hold it up, like I'll go like this, and hold it up with a light silhouette in the background, holding it up to the sky or a lit window. Brightly lit window is good. It's a good way to do it, and that'll expose a lot of symmetry, and kind of squinting your eyes so it's blurry and flipping it back and forth. You can even see here just flipping this back and forth. Probably noticed a little bit more already, but anyway, I'm going to move on to the bowl. I'm going to use the Tiny Hook by Svante Djarve. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I love it. It's a nice, tight little hook that is more than capable of carving any small scoop you want to. I'd say if you need a hook smaller than this, then I don't know, carving a spoon for ants. So I'm seeing in here, looks like there's some sort of crack in the bowl. That's what that dark mark is. And we'll see if that goes away, because I don't see it on the end grain. And it is getting smaller the more I carve it, so I don't know. The tricky cuts right here, right by the thumb. Alright, so you can see the scoop's getting nice and deep already. So now I'm starting to pay attention to making sure it's smooth, making sure I don't go so deep that I go outside of boundaries down here, because remember, this is not very even. Look down the line, you can see the bowl's a little lopsided, all sorts of stuff, but this is just how I do it. I don't really have this down to a science. I kind of have some big picture steps, and I kind of feel it out from there, and one that allows me just to not overthink what I'm doing. And I'd say the other thing it does is it really causes me to make scoops and spoons that are different every time, even if I am following a pattern. I'm not trying to mass produce anything, or I've never tried to make 10 of the same exact object or anything like that. I think if I were to try and make multiples of the same exact thing, then probably what I would do is do them all at the same time and consistently follow one step after each one. So kind of like batch each step. So rough cut each one, do the bowl on each one, do the handle of each one, stuff like that. Probably not in that order. Alright. So let's see. So I'm kind of getting to the point now where I explained how I could put a crank in it. I could put a crank in it after carving out the bowl. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay. Could go on forever with this bowl, but I'm just going to call it quits right now. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll do most of the bowl with the smaller hook. And once it's all dug out, maybe find a slightly larger hook. One of my Mora is to kind of just run through and get rid of any of the high stuff, so just to smooth out the bowl. But alright, let's put this down for a minute. But I don't get too hung up on making a super smooth bowl, because once again, this is hand carved. So Bowl's uneven across the top. There's no crank. I focused on making the bowl a little bit more evenly round than the actual outside was. Here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to just take off any crazy high spots. This is going to tell me the lowest spots I need to go to. And tell me if things are lopsided. Luckily, I haven't committed to anything, right? If I went super exact on the outside right now and something popped off on here, I'd be pretty concerned, but I'm not. And now I'm going to come in on the sides. It's a lot easier on the spoon. And I'm going to come on the shoulders a little bit. Now that's starting to matter. That bowl folds into the handle. This handle's just a little too long for my liking. So I'm just gonna the only real reason I'm doing this right now is to make it easier to carve. Alright. So that's probably one thing you could start off with if you know how long you want your scoop to be. Probably just take a saw to it right off the bat. That wouldn't hurt in the least. Alright, so looking scoopier. Probably look even more scoopier if we just put a couple lines on it. But okay, so I'm not carving directly against the side to shrink the bowl, but I'm kind of carving diagonal and down. And you can see how it's putting crank in it. And it's also going to change my bowl size, shape, well, and size. So, you know, that's why I made the bottom part, this part, a little deeper and wider than I would otherwise, because I knew what it does. It ends up shrinking the bowl, because as you go deeper, it looks less wide. So just a couple things to keep in mind. And then, as you feel out the bowl, you can either carve to the bowl or you can keep adjusting the bowl. Doesn't matter. And maybe do a little bit of both to chase the symmetry. I think I'm gonna carve to the bowl because it's looking kind of interesting. I like that. It's looking different. It's nice bold facets on the back here. Not a sander. don't sand any of my things. It's like a whole process, and in the end, I'll admit it makes your if you sand, it's like gives what you make a whole nother level of good looks, but I think it ends up also not looking handmade. And I do these, I make stuff like this because I want to make it handmade. Okay, so chase some facets up the back here. Okay, so now comes, let's see, let's move over this. And bring this down here. This down here. Carve spoons, we're basically doing spoon stuff on a miniature level. Something really crazy and go for it. Dug in shoulder shape. So you can see how it's looking a lot more scoopy. Anytime we're going to try to make these two curves meet up, like curve this way and curve this way, you're pretty much asking for it. What the heck? Why not? It's going to be a challenge, but that's why it's important to have sharp knives. You don't have a sharp knife for this part. It's not happening. Just rotate the blade lock. Do a lot more of the turning motion than the pushing or anything else. That's the only thing that's going to match up. So let's see. Widest in here, so actually go. Notice it's better to take out less, do more turning than do a whole power shove and then make them cut mark that you have to go back and. Alright, that's actually looking pretty good. I'd ask for more than that. Ooh, that might have been too far. So now I have to go back. Like the never ending. Yeah. Alright, now we're going to chase that up here, make some facets match up. A little wavy grain in here. Make things be same-ish. Not symmetrical, but same-ish. Symmetry hard. Same-ishness less hard. So let's see. Maybe. Alright, so where are we right now? Well, we have a scoop. It's not done at this point. You could call it quits, and it would be functional, but now it comes down to what are you going for? Are you going for bigger bold? You just want to trim up the wood along the side of it. You can see it's kind of got a curve now, and how much it has in the end is up to you. You can really add to the curving now if I do this. If I do this. Now there's even more of a curve. Number 4, luckily with the scoop, things don't get too crazy. In terms of like kneading, no one's looking for an itsy bitsy ladle. Not that I've met really. So this is definitely like a grip that you don't want to use on tiny stuff. You can see it's all leverage. Nothing's going to lose control. The blade's not going to go flying because it's all locked in. Same thing here, just once again, nice delicate thumb pivot. And what I'm going to use, I'm actually going to come back to the scoop. Let's put it in there. A lot better. The whole thing. And I'm feeling pretty good about this. And it comes down to how much you want to chase the symmetry, how much you want to trim up the back. Do you want to make this a really thin-walled scoop, really bold, small handle, big handle? That's no good going parallel with the grain and to get that chip out. So sometimes it's easier just to make these big cuts and then blend them in. Kind of messing up some of the work I put in earlier, and that's why I usually don't put in any final-ish looking stuff till the end. General rule of thumb. But I figured that'd be easy enough to blend in because of the direction of the grain. slice wide back in there. Looks good for and all right. Now, nothing's perfect about the scooping. Nothing's going to be perfect about it. But I think just a little tweaking here and there. Blend those big cuts in to the back. And I think you have the basics of a pretty good scoop. I'd say you could go around for a long time chasing the final finishing cuts, but I'm not going to make you watch me do that. All I would do for those finishing cuts is make sure nothing's standing out too much or too rough. I think it's pretty close to done though. Do a little micro chamfer along the bowl. And I think that's pretty good. Got a little rough spot right there, a little bit of tear out. Just go over. Rough spot, little tear out. And that is a hand carved scoop. That's what that is. Once again, it's all up to you how much you want to work on symmetry or looks. But I think what I would do for this one is I would probably just give it a once over and touch up any little parts like that. Same thing with the bowl. Bowl is always going to be a tricky one, especially on something this small. It's all about tracking the grain right. I think that'd be a great little spice spoon, sugar spice, something like that. All right. Well, that's it for today. You can like, subscribe, comment if you have questions, if you want to see more videos like this or done a little differently. Or you could just keep going. Sometimes you just gotta put it down. Say it's done. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. Yeah. Check out my other videos.